if you do not recover, we do not train, we do not perform, because that's where you're really going to be burning the candle at both ends. Just because you are going to be doing some of these sprints, you're not going to be in a catabolic state if you are recovering, if you are sleeping.
Let me tell you a little bit about Kris Gethin. He was voted world's #1 trainer twice, not once, twice, natural pro bodybuilder, is a 4-time Ironman finisher, ultra marathoner, author, host of the Kris Gethin podcast, founder of Kris Gethin Coaching, founder of Kris Gethin Gyms, a public speaker, including a TED Talk. He's been on the cover of Ironman and a magazine called Train.
We know that fitness is good. We go to the gym, we go to work out, but then we have a supplement that is to fuel this workout. That supplement is full of artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, and a lot of these ingredients aren't even patented. They're generic ingredients that haven't been tested for the efficacy or the purity or the safety. And we think that is part of the fitness industry or the health industry. It is not. It's a huge disconnect. And unfortunately, it's getting worse, especially.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Hi, and welcome to the next talk of the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity Summit series. This one is Longevity Lessons from Bodybuilders and Endurance Athletes. And I've got to tell you, the guy I'm going to introduce, I don't know if, depending on how they do the editing, you may be seeing him right now. The guy I'm going to introduce, his name's Kris Gethin, and he's a bodybuilder. He was gracious enough to have me on his podcast back in June of 2020. We've remained in contact. And as I was putting together this longevity summit, I was thinking we've got to include Kris, but it may not be like natural that you have a bodybuilder and an endurance athlete and longevity, right? So I started doing some digging, and this is the thing that really tipped the scale for me. I'm looking at Kris Gethin has a newsletter, the Gethin newsletter, and one of the things he says as an enticement to join the newsletter is that you get access to his longevity hacks, which have helped him achieve a biological age of 26 at 48. That may have even been bumped up and down since then. And it was at that moment that I was like, okay, we got to have Kris Gethin on this summit. Let me tell you a little bit about Kris Gethin. So he was voted world's #1 trainer twice, not once, twice, natural pro bodybuilder, is a 4-time Ironman finisher. Wow. Like I run half marathons and that drains me. Ultra marathoner. Okay. Also, wow. Author, host of the Kris Gethin podcast. That was when I was on. Go check that out. Founder of Kris Gethin Coaching, founder of Kris Gethin Gyms, a public speaker, including a TED Talk. And actually on his website, he's been on the cover of Ironman and a magazine called Train, which I'm not into the bodybuilding that much, but he's been on that at least 3 times that I saw. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Kris Gethin. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you very much, Chris, and I really appreciate that introduction.
All right. So transformation is what you do, right? You go on your websites, you've got before and afters, you're helping people transform their lives, their physicality. It's where you built your expertise. It continues to be your focus. Walk us through as your mindset related to longevity has become a more and more important part of the transformations that you facilitate.
Yeah, so as a bodybuilder, I'd go through transformations all the time. You'd have your off season and then you'd diet down for 12 weeks for a bodybuilding show. But that necessarily isn't the healthiest way to go. Yes, it does create a sense of urgency. And people like to have that aesthetic transformation. But what is important is we recognize that the 12-week or 16-week or 18-week transformation is literally only a boot camp for the rest of your life. And that's all it is. So if people sign up, for instance, they don't just pay for 12 weeks and that's it. We have a reoccurring membership because it's very, very important that accountability sticks and gives them further information and education of the importance of their health internally and aesthetically that will come. Okay. So how I came across this initially was back in 2014 when I was diagnosed with mold toxicity. And that's when I really went down the rabbit hole. I spent like 6 weeks at Dr. Spanaug's clinic in Oldsmar, Florida, where I was, having IVs every single day to try to detox my body, taking a lot of binders, following a particular nutritional protocol, doing colonic hydrotherapy. And that's when I really realized, okay, wow, there's a lot of mold in coffees. There's a lot of mold in grains. There's a lot of mold in like wines, red wines and dark chocolate, et cetera, et cetera. So that's when I really started looking into the longevity aspect and how by prioritizing our internal health and our lifeline, it can really then secondarily take care of our aesthetics. Because as soon as I changed my protocol internally, I realized that the inflammation that I was dealing with in my joints and, my connective tissue, which I thought was a byproduct of weight training, automatically disappeared. And then here I am, like I said, at 49 years old. I started off with a biological age exceeding my chronological age, and now I've been able to reverse it every single year that I have my biological age tested.
Talk about that biological age, actually, because that's something that we'll be covering in this longevity summit. And I think there's at least one test you and I have in common. But talk about kind of how you approached which tests you're looking at, and because there's a couple out there, and kind of the results that you've gotten from those.
Yeah, as we know, you can do like the Horvath clock. There's methylation, there's telomere testing, and there's glycan age testing. I've done the telomeres and I've done the glycan age. That I kind of go through every year, and I use that as my indicator. So as an athlete or a bodybuilder, we're constantly putting ourselves through inflammation. Generally, as an endurance athlete, we have to be very careful of our hormones, testosterone levels, putting our central nervous system under too much stress. So we have to keep a close eye on that. So I always have my clients and myself, do blood tests every 3 months, bring back the training, really focus on prioritizing our recovery, because that will dictate our performance, not from just a physical aspect, but from internal physiological aspect. So the priority is always based on recovery. If you do not recover, we do not train, we do not perform, because that's where you're really going to be burning the candle at both ends. So, making sure that you sleep, if you're one of those people that is sympathetic dominant, then let's see what we can do to be parasympathetic state. So that could be toning our vagal nerve. It could be with a vagal nerve stimulator. It could be with ice therapy, cold thermogenesis. It could be through meditation, grounding, earthing. There's so many ways that we should be doing that in order for us to be in perfect equanimity and being in our present time, as opposed to focusing on anxiety of the past or depression, thinking about the future and being in the now.
Very, very interesting. So one of the things you talked about is if you're not recovered, and this is mostly from a personal perspective, because I am in fact sore right now, does that mean all soreness is gone? Or does that mean is that not necessarily? So you'll work through some soreness, or what's your kind of stance from a bodybuilder perspective on being sore? And then when is the next training session?
Yeah, from a bodybuilder standpoint, make sure that you are fully recovered so you're not feeling sore at all. So I trained legs on Monday. I'm still kind of sore now. That's why a lot of my talks that I do or podcasts are on my desktop treadmill. So I keep movement, keep blood flow, so I'm able to transport the amino acids and essential nutrients to the localized area that has broken down muscle tissue or torn muscle tissue. So I do wait usually about 7 days to hit that muscle group again. So every muscle group, unless it's a smaller muscle group that recovers a lot quicker, could be calves, could be abs, for instance, or if you have a weak muscle group, could be shoulders, then you'd hit that maybe once every 5 days. But generally, once every 7 days is a typical bro split of a bodybuilder that would go by. Because again, I'm 49 years old, even though I've got the biological age, I know my ability to recover is not quite as it used to be. So I do whatever I can to enhance my recovery mechanisms to hit those muscle groups, but I'm not going to overdo it, because I've been there where I've tried to hit, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and I literally go backwards, and then I run the risk of injury. So the priority is always with the sleep. I go to bed about 7:30 in the evening. I'm always using like a PEMF device. I try to incorporate my ancestral wisdom of earthing, grounding, getting sunlight, vitamin D, etc., meditation. But occasionally I'll bring in today's technology. That could be a PEMF. It could be stem cells. Of course, I use your supplements, but it's certain supplementation that I will take to ensure that not only am I reversing my biological age, but I'm enhancing my recovery in the process.
I like that because, yes, recovery makes sure that you're not sore, but something I think a lot of people maybe not in the bodybuilding space and not necessarily following it that closely, you're very specific. You're still moving, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's something that some people don't realize. Oh, it's a recovery day, so I don't do anything, and that's not a good thing. That's actually a bad thing.
And that is the typical bodybuilder. They're static ornaments outside of the gym because now they're thinking, okay, I've got to conserve calories. I've got to eat. I've got to grow. When in fact, our blood is our transportation to these localized areas. And that's why it's very, very important to move. And of course, the heart is the most important muscle that we should be working. So I did a HIIT workout this morning. I've got one of those Carol AI bikes. I did 65 sprints because I know that my VO2 max is very, very important. And, when I was doing a lot of my ultramarathons or Ironman training, I wouldn't do the long and slow stuff. I wouldn't do too much gray area stuff. It was always, I'd do the long and slow on the weekends because you've got to have time in the saddle. You have to have time on the trails. But during the week, I would really cut back on the volume of my workouts. I'd still work out 4 times a week, but I wouldn't do such high repetitions and I wouldn't do so many sets. And with my cardio workouts, it was more sprint-based work in the pool, on the hills, on the bike, etc. And that created more efficiency, so I wasn't overdoing it.
I think there's something really primal about sprinting, and I'm going to talk specifically about like on the road running, sprinting. It just feels so childlike. I love to do it, and it's one of my favorite training things. And it's probably true in a pool too, right? If you're just swimming all out as fast as you can, there's something exhilarating about that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And you're talking about primal. We know Mark Sisson, who owned Primal Kitchen, and part of his longevity protocol, a lot of sprints and primal movements. And we know that our VO2 max has a strong correlation with longevity, such as grip strength and squat strength as well. So combine them all. And believe me, just because you are going to be doing some of these sprints, you're not going to wither away. You're not going to be in a catabolic state if you are recovering, if you are sleeping.
Yeah. All right. So this is very kind of athlete focused right now. What mistakes do athletes make when it comes to longevity?
Well, there's so many. How much time do you have? Like, I can tell you the mistake that I used to make was, if you think about it, the general population is eating about 3 meals a day. Bodybuilders are eating 6 to 7 meals a day, and a couple of them could be shakes. Now, we generally don't care the form of those foods. We just need those macros. So we're going to Costco's. We're going to anywhere that we can get the food as cheap as possible, as long as it hit the macros on our plate. Now, that isn't good for longevity because, as we know, the food supply today has a lot of antibiotics. It has pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate, and we're consuming that. More consumption of antibiotics are actually through the food that we eat, not from what we consume from the pharmacy, would you believe? So, of course, that can cause issues. If we're eating, let's say, farmed raised salmon, we know that has a disproportionate amount of omega-6 compared to omega-3, which is quite the opposite if we were to get it freshly caught. So that is one of the biggest mistakes. So if we're eating those foods as 3 meals a day, but now as a bodybuilder, we're eating that 6 times a day, we're putting twice the amount of stress potentially on our bodies. So that's why I do tell all my athletes, and this is what I do, is wild caught, humane raised, organic whenever possible, and that's probably the number one thing. And then the number two, and the crazy thing is, like I said, as soon as I started changing my protocol and my diet, I was like, okay, my recovery's enhanced. I'm not dealing with the aches and pains that I thought was from bodybuilding and weight training with extremely heavy weight. And that's the thing that I want to transition to next, is that bodybuilders do think that the number on the barbell or the dumbbell matters. It doesn't. And that creates a lot of issues as well, because now you're dealing with injuries, you're dealing with more inflammation, you're dealing with more stress, when its intensity is the key. just having shortening your rest period so you don't have to train so heavy, you're going to have enough glycogen within your muscle and within your liver that's going to provide you with the fuel to get through those workouts. So, that can be a longevity aspect, but that is a mistake that bodybuilders make. We're egotistical, we train with heavy weights, but there's only so many clicks of that pen that you have, and you can get just as good results, if not better, just through increasing the intensity and shortening the rest period and increasing the volume of those workouts.
Is there anything from a mistake that you see endurance athletes are tending to make with respect to longevity? Overtraining and the food that they eat. So I don't know if you've ever been to an Ironman or an ultra marathon. You look at the aid stations, the food that they have there is atrocious. You finish an Ironman, they'll give you a food ticket. So now you can go and help yourself to all the free food. It's cookies, it's pizzas, they're burgers, it's fries. Nothing's healthy. And if you stop at the aid stations on an ultra marathon, you've got like the last one that I did is a frozen 50. They even had alcohol there. Would you believe they had alcohol? But they've got chips there. They've got M&Ms, loads of chocolate, which believe me, it is enticing once you've just done 13 miles and here's your next aid station. But, of course, that's causing even more inflammation. And I noticed that from, running with a lot of endurance athletes or training with a lot of endurance athletes. Their nutrition is horrendous because they're burning 5,000 plus calories per day throughout their training, which is causing a lot of inflammation. And then they compound that with even more inflammation. And truth be told, maybe they look great on the outside, but internally they are screaming because there's no nutritional density, only calorie density. And that's the biggest mistake that I see in the endurance world. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Having run a number, I think my wife and I are at like 11 half marathons. The food that comes afterwards is, not good.
It's horrendous.
It tastes amazing.
Yeah,
and it's good to
of course.
Reward yourself, right? But is it really a reward? I think that's the ultimate question, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a reward at all because at that time, look, you're tired, you're emotionally charged. That's why I tell my clients, look, if you're not sleeping at night, the chances of your cravings and you crashing is going to be much, much higher because now you're emotionally charged and you're like, I just want to feel better. I'm going to go for that sugary cookie. Well, of course. So when you're out on the course, you're feeling the same way. And unfortunately, it is like a rolling buffet out there, but unfortunately of all the desserts.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast. Yeah, the bad end. So you talk about a disconnect between health and fitness. Why is there a disconnect between health and fitness?
Well, let's just talk about the supplement industry and the health and fitness industry as an example. So if we look at, we know that fitness is good. We go to the gym, we go to work out, but then we have a supplement that is to fuel this workout. However, that supplement is full of artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, just a load of crap. And a lot of these ingredients aren't even patented. They're generic ingredients that haven't been tested for the efficacy or the purity or the safety. But we're like, oh, I need this pre-workout to go train. I need to have this intra-workout. I need to have the EAAs. But the EAAs are flavored with a lot of crap, a lot of dyes, a lot of sucralose or ACE-K. And we think that is part of the fitness industry or the health industry. It is not. It's a huge disconnect. And unfortunately, it's getting worse, especially, you look at energy drinks, you look at all this crap that people are just relying upon now just to get to the gym. Well, why don't you use your motivation and your passion to change yourself, to evolve, to be better? But unfortunately, as we know, the overconsumption of caffeine, and I look at some of these pre-workouts today, they got over 400 megs of caffeine. I'm like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? So that's just a prime example of how there's a huge disconnect. And like we know, as I just mentioned about the endurance athletes, okay, that's fitness. It's good as long as you don't overdo it. But where's the healthy part of this? If you're consuming those M&Ms and chocolates as part of your training, like a lot of bodybuilders, I don't know why, they'll go, okay, as soon as I finish my workout, I need glycogen. What am I going to choose? Pop-Tarts and gummies. You know, it's atrocious. It's atrocious. Or cereals, you know. Why don't you have like, you know, like a banana or fruit? Of course, you know, it does, you know, have fructose. It does have to pass through the liver, but it's okay. Have, you know, some healthy Rice Krispies. I mean, the organic stuff, you know, not the crap that you're going to go and get on the supermarket shelf with, you know, the kids cereal. But there's so many different ways that you can fuel yourself instead of the crap. As I said, it should be nutrient dense, not calorie dense. But unfortunately, the majority of people in the fitness industry go for calorie dense without a care of their body because they look healthy. They're like, okay, I'm pretty much indestructible. I'll be fine. And that is a bad indicator.
Yeah, and I do have to share that Pop-Tarts were a staple for breakfast as I was growing up. So
yeah, staples and cereals. Yeah, as we know, you know, Ansel Keys, everybody knows Ansel Keys, you know, there was people that were paid off to say, okay, we're going to vilify fats and we're going to say that these grains in the morning or the cereals in the morning is the perfect way to start your day. Thumbs up, you know. As we know, it's just full of sugar that is basically like having a cheesecake for breakfast. And now you're going to have that sugar crash and that sugar craving for the rest of the day. It is like the analogy of picking up your phone first thing in the morning. Well, guess what? You're probably going to be addicted to it for the rest of the day now.
Yeah, that is a tough one, and I've got 13-year-old twins, and really trying to create some sort of healthy mindset about the device, and I'm sure you bump into this too, because part of what we do is we're on social media, and so we it's not even an excuse. Like we really do need to have it, and then you know we can lose time in it. It's really frustrating. Do you have like
we've got
a trick?
Yeah, well, we got to use it and not allow it to use us because that's what it does. It uses us. But I try to bookend my day. So an hour in the morning and at least an hour in the evening, at least minimum. No devices whatsoever. And we have trained ourselves to be distracted. If somebody was to go and get alcohol, they have to go to the liquor store. If somebody was to get drugs, heroin, whatever, they have to find a drug dealer. Unfortunately, there's like 13 drugs on this device. We got Amazon, we got Uber Eats, we've got our emails, we got WhatsApp, we got text messaging. It's all here, and it is addicting, and it's causing this distraction. And that's why I always go to bed and I read at night, because that is allowing me to focus and follow through with what I start with. My guitar lessons as well. I'm not distracted. I'm following through. So because there is parts of our day that we are constantly distracted. Not only are we getting the dopamine fix from the phone, we're getting the dopamine fix from the artificial light. And as we know, too much dopamine can make us stupid, basically. So we have to be wary of that we are releasing our oxytocin, our serotonin, and it isn't just dopamine and norepinephrine all the time.
Yeah, that is a tough one. That's going to be a tough one to manage. I had a conversation with Jean, the founder of the magazine Biohackers, and one of the concepts was like we were talking about the evolution and potentially having man speed up evolution, and there will be in my opinion, there'll be a successful evolutionary trait to be able to manage these devices, right? Because so many people get lost in them. If there's just some sort of gene you can turn on where the device, you still have all the good, historical value of the genes that cause dopamine to be useful, right? So that's the social interactions. What's happening is we're getting quote unquote social interactions from these devices, and we're very much hardwired to get pleasure out of those, because figuring out everybody in our tribe, figuring out where they stand, whose side they're on, all of that, we're hardwired to enjoy that conversation and that information, because it can be valuable for your survival. And then now we got this device. I think if we could just figure out some gene to turn that off, that would be amazing. And it was an interesting conversation. It's one of the other talks in this longevity summit. I wanted to change gears a little bit here and really get into a key wheelhouse of yours and share. So there's an NIH, and I just pulled up a couple studies that points out one of the most striking effects of age is the involuntary loss of muscle mass, strength, and function. It's termed sarcopenia, right?
Yeah, sarcopenia.
Yep. Muscle mass decreases approximately 3 to 8% per decade after the age of 30. And this rate of decline is even higher after the age of 60. I looked it up as about 12%. And throw that in with 16 studies this is a meta-analysis that are looking at SMI, skeletal mass, muscle mass indices. And there was a significant association with the increased risk of all-cause mortality when there was a low SMI index. So this is probably stuff all that you know. What, as a trainer, what would be some key things that you would say, hey, here's what you need to do to really start mitigating that? Because, I'm 54. I'm well into I'm supposed to have lost 3 to 8%. And these numbers scare me. So I'm working hard to make sure I've got that muscle mass. What would be the advice you would give the audience?
Okay, well, side note, I had no idea you were 54. I thought you were younger than me. You look absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to continue using your skin products for sure. I'm sold.
Which you tried for the first time today.
Yeah, I did. I tried it for the first time, but now I'm hooked. So we know there's a strong correlation with squat strength, with grip strength, with longevity. And the majority of the people in a westernized culture, when somebody has a fall, let's say they're in their 80s, 90s or whatever, they have a fall, statistics are very, very high to show that within 3 to 6 months, that person dies. They end up in hospital. And now people are caring from them. Now they feel they have no purpose. They're not moving and they die. Where if you look at some of the blue zones, if you look in Okinawa, for instance, they have no term for retirement. They don't sit on chairs. The older generation do not sit on chairs. They sit on the floor. And on average, they've noticed that a lot of these centenarians are standing and sitting from the floor at least 30 times a day. That is their squat strength. Yeah, that's a burpee. That's their resistance. That is causing, obviously, preventing sarcopenia, and it's creating more bone density in these individuals. They're constantly balancing. Now, a lot of us are trying to balance ourselves from Netflix to the car or whatever in the westernized culture. And that's why it's very important. As we get a little bit older, we don't do just bilateral movements. We do unilateral movements. So we could be holding on to something to support to do a one-legged squat. Doesn't have to be a full squat, just a little bit, using more Bosu balls, more balancing planks and stuff like that. It's very, very important. If you don't use it, you will lose it. There's no doubt about it. And it doesn't always have to be going to the gym. You can do body weight movements at home. But it's very, very important that you have that muscle density, because that has a strong correlation, along with our VO2 max, with longevity. So weight training isn't just for bodybuilders and for people oiled up in their posing pants. It is a perfect correlation with longevity. You see, like, the majority of my family are farmers. I grew up on a farm myself. And my grandparents, lived into their 90s, in good health. My grandfather just passed away a couple of years ago, but he kept moving. And it's very important as a son, daughter, or grandson, is don't do everything for them. And we generally do that. We're like, oh, we'll grab that for you, or we'll hold the shopping. No. Let them do it. And we did that with my grandfather, and he lived till 94 years old in very, very, very good health.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really good advice. It makes me think about, there's a lot of longevity hacks out there, and we'll talk specifically, well, not just supplements, but kind of hacks. I was wondering if there's any of the standard ones that you're aware of that you tend to stay away from. And, the first things that come to mind, potentially metformin. You may have some opinions about that, and NMN, right? Intermittent fasting, and maybe any others. Are there some that you've said, I looked at it and I really am going to stay away from those for XYZ reason?
There's a couple out there that I've got I'm on the fence. But the thing is, like you mentioned, like metformin, there's a lot of great alternatives out there now. We had berberine before, but now our friend Sean Wells obviously came out with dihydroberberine, which is about 10 times more bioavailable than berberine itself. And that has been shown to be just as good, if not better. And don't quote me because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician, but Sean Wells said this as well on many podcasts, is that it is better than metformin. So of course, whenever you do have a natural version that you can go towards, then please do. But of course, run it past your doctor too. But, there's others, I know a lot of people in the longevity world do go to certain kind of plants and plant medicines. It's not always something that's going to be specifically for you. I know I wouldn't encourage it. You have to be called towards it. But is there anything that I can think of? I've probably tried some things and thought, you know what, I've tried a vagal nerve stimulator and that doesn't really work for me. But nothing off the top of my head that I can think of. For myself and my clients, when it comes to fasting, we do like a controlled fasting methods because my clients are very active. So I'm not going to follow the Dr. Sachin Panda or the Dr. Jason Fung way of fasting. I will allow my clients to have some essential amino acids and some glutamine during their fasting period because they're athletic, they're working out, they're moving a lot more, and they're trying to build or maintain muscle at the very least. So that'll be a fasting protocol. And if it's a male, then of course that fasting protocol will be a little bit longer. But if it's a female, then you have to be very, very careful. It can really affect your hormones. It can downregulate the thyroid. So you have to be very careful in that aspect.
Yeah, and I mentioned metformin, and this question kind of popped into my head because there's some research that's showing, metformin has a deleterious effect on muscle growth, right? So you still grow muscles, but you don't grow them as much. There's a, 2 to 3% reduce. And then it's also supported in an again, deleterious effect on VO2 max improvements. And so I'm actually one of the speakers in this summit is a Dr. Stanfield, who has, I love his approach, and it, goes against some of the, I would say, conventional wisdom, but he's just looking at the literature and thinking about it and talking about it. And it's just really smart stuff.
Yeah. So if I do have any clients that are, let's say they're diabetic or pre-diabetic and they're being prescribed metformin, I will ask them to take it as far away from their workouts as possible. So let's say if they're training at midday, then take that metformin in the evening before you go to bed, but do not take it around your workout.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right. So I have a couple questions that I like to ask as standard questions. What 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, maybe we can call them shortcuts because everybody loves that, to longevity and a long health span can you share? Well,
I'd say I'm going to be selfish and call out the one that is most beneficial for me. And that's not because it mobilizes fatty acids. It's not because it helps stabilize blood sugar or helps with the browning of the fat to make us more metabolically active. And that's ice baths. I do it every single morning. I know it's like the trendy thing now, but I've been doing it since I started when I was in college, studying international health and sports therapy back in '96. And for me, it is all about vagal nerve stimulation, vagal nerve toning. I feel so much more emotionally stable throughout the day. And if I'm going to be a little less reactory in certain circumstances, because I am definitely more of an anxious individual, I am definitely more sympathetic dominant, more dopamine dominant. If I can balance that out a little bit better, then I'm going to do it. And ice baths are the number one thing that has done that for me and a lot of my clients. Luckily, I've got one of those ice baths that's always cold, so I'll do it 3 minutes in the morning. If I feel like I need to jump in there again later in the day, then I'll jump in there again in the day. And that's been the number one biohack for me. I get asked all the time, what are your top 5? Now, there's another one called the Human Regenerator, but that's a $120,000 machine that's not accessible for a lot of people. So for me, it's something that's accessible for everybody, and that is cold thermogenesis. You don't have an ice bath, make sure that you get the cold water on your neck, on your inguinal nodes, your lymphatic nodes, your occipital nodes, and that really, really does help. It's a love-hate relationship, of course, but once you do it, and I think we need to do hard stuff in the morning because we know with society and technology making our lives easier, we're getting sicker and we're getting fatter. So start off with hard stuff in the morning, and everything else will be easier following. And it's like having a shot of caffeine in the morning when you jump in that ice bath as well.
You just mentioned caffeine. Do you drink coffee or tea in the morning, or do you, nope?
No, because I know that my cortisol levels are quite spiked in the morning. And if I have caffeine, I'm going to spike it even more. So I stay away from caffeine.
I did learn that same kind of process or thought process related to cortisol, but this is from a guy named Anthony Kunkel. He's a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion, and he does use caffeine. I don't even think he's drinking coffee. He's probably just taking pills. He's very kind of optimized, but pointed out, hey, that first cup of coffee should be much later in the day than you think. Because your body's got a natural process for waking up. That's that cortisol spike. And then when that's coming down, maybe that's the time to have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, for sure. If you're going to work out around midday or something and you want to have caffeine, perfect. Then that's great. And, just a sidestep there, coffee is one of the most contaminated products in the world, bar none. There's a lot of mold and mycotoxins that is found in the majority of coffees out there. So it's very important that you do have something that is like shade grown, a single origin that's grown at a high altitude as well. And, obviously organic. Because there's so many mold toxins in there that can affect a lot of people. So buyer beware when it comes to coffee. Because look, when we go to McDonald's, we know what we're getting. But when we get coffee, we don't think we're getting something that could potentially be a neurotoxin.
Yeah, very true. Very true. What's the best way for people to contact you?
I'd say it's probably on Instagram. It's KRIS, Kris Gethin, Gethin, or my website, krisgethin.com. But I answer questions on Instagram. I eventually get to them.
Very cool. So, and then in the near future, I know you've had some changes this year. I actually watched the video with you and your wife kind of reviewing the changes. In the near future, what are you most excited about?
Well, the near future, I'm about to go on the road now until March, basically. I'm just, I've been on the road for 6 months this year already. I am looking forward to being back in Boise, but I've just finished doing a video series called the Legacy Video Trainer, which basically handholds people through a transformation, reverse their biological age, how to work around injuries, etc. So we literally just launched the first 6 weeks of that, and we're about to launch the next 6 weeks. So I'm really looking forward to allowing that to release itself so I can grow my hair back. It's been a stressful time, but a very enjoyable time.
Excellent. All right. So if you want to follow up with him, Kris Gethin on Instagram, or Kris Gethin, and that's KrisGethin.com. You can find him at his website. Kris, thank you so much. I'm so proud to call you a friend, a fellow biohacker, and thank you for taking the time out to join us on this summit.
I thank you, and I really appreciate your support as well of allowing, obviously, me to be on your show, but my clients to actually have a piece of your supplementation that I've been taking for many, many years now. So I really appreciate your contribution.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.